Okay, well, it's now 7 o'clock and the quorum is present, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. The first item up is the Pledge of Allegiance, which is an initiative this year. So everybody rise and either say or don't say the pledge as you wish. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And first item on the agenda is citizens' concerns. Does anybody in the audience have any issues to raise that are not on our agenda? No. All right. Chairman's update. I have a number of items involving NARA and the library. Thursday, August 11th at 6:30 at the NARA Amphitheater will be a kids' concert by Ben Rudnick and Friends. Thursday, a week later, Thursday, 8/18, also at 6:30 at the NARA Amphitheater, the Tanglewood Marionettes production of Hansel and Gretel. There is a $3 per person charge, $10 per family, up to a 5-member family. Saturday, August 20th, from 1 to 7 at NARA, the annual Essence of India Festival. For more information, you can see the website essenceofindia.org. It is free, but there are fees for some activities. From 1 to 3, there's going to be cricket without borders. 3 to 7 is dance, music, food, and various booths. Thursday, 8/25 at 6:30 at NARA Amphitheater, Chinese Music and Dance Night, sponsored by the Acton Chinese Language School and the town with a grant from the Acton Boxborough Cultural Council. Friday, August 26 at 7:30, also at NARA Amphitheater, Kashmir, a Led Zeppelin tribute band. And then on the library side, actonmemoriallibrary.org, for those of you who want more information, there's the summer film series continuing on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock p.m. in the library meeting room, which is the room on the first floor, with a discussion following the screening. It's sponsored by the Friends of the Acton Libraries. On August 10th, this week, is the movie Dave. And on August 17th is the movie No. We're specializing in one-syllable names, I guess, this month. Monday, September 5th, is the Labor Day holiday. Thursday, September 8th, sometime in the early evening, it's probably going to be 6 or 6:30, at the Public Safety Facility will be a public information meeting about the September 20th ballot vote on the Minuteman New Building project. Member town representatives will be meeting later this week to start planning. And the next Board of Selectmen meeting is Monday, September 12th at 7 o'clock. It will be the continuation of the hearing on the Nagog Pond Water Treatment Plant project. And I will now turn it over to the town manager to address, among other things, the issue of the date for the 3 boards meeting. Mr. Manager.
Okay, but I'm not starting with that. First of all, I'd like to announce, after a worldwide search spanning the globe, so to speak, I have appointed Robert Hart as fire chief for the town of Acton. Robert's been the Acton fire chief since the end of February. He's done a great job, and we put him through the ringer last week through an assessment center. He did a terrific job, and he actually started his duties as the fire chief yesterday. And you can see one of his first official acts was to make the uniforms green. And it's not even St. Patrick's Day. But I want to welcome, I'm looking forward to working with Robert, and I think Robert will do a great job for us. So congratulations, Robert. Now, as Janet has mentioned, in the last few years we've had a tri-board meeting between Selectmen, the school committee, and the FinCom, basically to talk about budgetary issues, trends, concerns, etc. The chairs of the 3 boards have been getting together to talk about maybe doing doing the tri-board meeting in 2 phases. The first one being more of a social team-building type of exercise, and then having kind of the traditional tri-board meeting at a later date. So Peter had asked me that they've come up with 3 potential dates for the kind of informal team-building exercise, that being September 7th, 14th, or the 21st, and I believe they're all Wednesdays. I know Peter has a slight preference for the 7th, but we're trying to get some consensus. So it would be held at Amy Krishnamurthy's house, so it'd be a little more informal than what we're used to. Yes.
Katie, go ahead.
The 7th is a legal and voters opening meeting, and so I think a number of us here would often go to that.
Okay.
So my preference would be the 14th or the 21st, but if the only date works, I suppose the 7th.
What did you say?
It's the League of Women Voters opening meeting on the 7th, their
Yeah.
fall, to kick off the year, so I think a lot of us would probably prefer the 14th or the 21st.
I think that Peter actually said, that he could do any of those days. And he said agreed 9/7 was best, but I didn't see any reference in the email string to who else said that September 7th was best. I would add that Margaret, as chairman of the FinCom, which is meeting on the 6th and the 13th, said it would be better. She would prefer not to have the three boards meeting the next night after FinCom meeting, so not the 7th or the 14th, which sort of leaves the 21st. Or I think they also mentioned Tuesday, September 20th. But we need to get a general sense of what would work or not work for our board, and then presumably the three chairs will get together and decide which option works for most people.
I think I won't, except for TAC, which I don't know when it's meeting. I think I'm not going to put in a preference. I'll go with any date of any mentioned above.
You would?
Yeah.
Vote for 7?
No, I'm just not going to, consider me a neutral and
Oh,
and
you
pick
don't.
me.
You could do any of them, or you don't? Okay.
I'm going to be in the same place as Franny. I don't really have a preference for date at the moment, although knowing sooner rather than later would be better.
Well, why don't we just say preferably not the 7th? Yeah, for the sake of the league meeting. So 14, 20, or 21.
The 20th is the night
Yes,
of
the league,
day
I
of the-
forgot about the league at that moment, yes.
Yeah.
So the 14th to the 21st.
And the 20th is the Minuteman vote, but hopefully everybody could vote before.
Yeah, it's the election.
For what?
It's the election for Minuteman, for the
That's-
building,
it's-
or the vote is on
So
the 20th.
It's going to be almost done, because it'll be over at 8.
Yeah, it depends on what time we meet.
So-
Sounds like potentially early.
And
But,
of course, everybody who participates in the three boards meeting will have voted early.
well, you can't vote
vote too
early because the polls aren't open. So no,
5 or
in all
6,
seriousness, it might be hard for me to be able to get off of a train, vote, and get to a meeting if we're meeting early. So the 20th would be,
What time was the meeting going to be, the three
That's
boards
what-
meeting?
You know something? I don't know.
probably haven't decided.
I assume it'd be like 6:30.
So maybe 14th
Yeah.
and
21st.
21st, preferably because the 20th is the ballot vote, and people who are working during the day in town will have to come home to
I thought they
vote.
gave us the 7th, 14th, and 21st, right? They
Right.
didn't give us the 20th.
Margaret said the
Margaret said
20th.
possibly.
They mentioned the 20th as well in
Oh.
the email.
Oh, okay.
I don't know which email, I thought it was the email we all got, but,
Okay.
I have to read a notice of the hearing. Is that the next item on the agenda?
I have one other thing to report,
Yeah.
but whatever. Two of them.
Okay, well, why don't I read the notice of the agenda, and then we can go back to your manager's minute. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the General Laws that the Board of Selectmen will hold a hearing in the Francis Faulkner Room 204 in the Acton Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, on August 8, 2016, at 7:10 p.m. on the application of Philo's Great Road, Incorporated, in doing business as Philo's Great Road, for an all-alcohol license transfer from Bella Familia, Inc., located at 59 Great Road, Acton, Mass., and for a pledge of license. The application is on file in the Selectmen's office and may be viewed during normal working hours. Mr. Manager.
Thanks. Just a couple other things. I know we made the board aware, but we've received a grant from Mass DOT for $400,000 for the Complete Streets program. Corey York really worked hard on this, and in fact, I personally got a phone call from the Lieutenant Governor telling us we got the grant, and $400,000 covers a lot of things. Some of the things we've been trying to resolve, like bike lanes that will link the two rail trails together, town center improvements for traffic calming, cross Acton transit signage around the bus routes, Gardner Field accessibility improvements, some improvements at Main and Hayward, the Taylor Road corridor, which we've been dealing with for a number of years, sheltered bike racks at the train station, even a bike repair stand at the train station. So there's like 14 different projects, but Corey deserves a lot of credit for this. He worked hard, and I think we probably got one of the biggest awards in the state. And finally, I just wanted to make the board aware, because I know you all have worked with her from time to time, but Mary Ann Faulkner's father passed away over the weekend. The arrangements have not totally been made yet, so once I know those, I will share those with the board. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right. We now have the license application for Philos. We've had a number of meetings regarding gradual shifting of the business operation from Bella Familia to Philos, and so this is the final step, because I think at the last meeting we granted a temporary carry-in license, which is not grantable unless you don't have a liquor license. So I don't know if are there any comments, any questions?
By total coincidence, I ate in the Groton Philos Cucina yesterday. It was delicious.
Good. Ching Sung, did you have something to say? No. Anybody else? Any comments from the board? Any comments from the audience about Philos license application? Do I have a motion to approve, just reading the language of the...
So moved.
Who was that?
Second, that was Katie.
Okay, Katie,
And I
Katie
seconded.
moves, and Franny second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Done. No, hi. Well, welcome. Well, that's good.
How many do you have? I feel like
This is my second one.
Oh, this is only the second, okay.
Yeah, this is my second one. Joe Watson is an old friend of mine. I knew he was close to retirement, so I approached him in the mouth. I've been in the area before. I'm sorry. I'm nervous.
You have to push the button on the base. It'll light up. If you push that button. Oh.
Soft.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not very.
Oh.
But anyway, I've
Well.
been in the area before. I was part of the Cereals concept that was around in Maine just a few years back. You might know Vincenzo's in Concord. I was with Vinny for over 20 years, and a little bit of experience, so I'm glad that I'm expanding to this area back. I appreciate the support.
Well, good luck. And you'll probably see some of us there, so thank you. Okay, our next hearing is not until 7:30, so I would like to turn to the consent agenda, if I can find my... Okay, is Mr. Oh, yes, Mr. Bartle is in the audience. I wanted to make sure. Consent agenda, item 7, positive spin on ALS bike ride fundraiser, September 25, 2016. Item 8, site plan special permit amendment, 178 Great Road. I'm actually going to hold that. Item 9, committee appointment, Charles Olmsted, Capital Planning Improvement Committee, at-large member. Item 10, committee appointment, John Churchill, Acton Boxborough Regional School Committee, at-large. Well, actually, that's not the committee member. He's actually appointed or chosen by the committee. Okay.
I'll hold for Charlie.
Okay, thank you. Item 11, executive session minutes, July 11, 2016. Item 12, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Congregation Beth Elohim, September 11, 2016. Item 13, multiple one-day alcoholic beverage licenses, Theater 3. Item 14, one-day alcoholic beverage license, J. Munhanthan, Nara Park, September 5, 2016. Item 15, one-day alcoholic beverage license, ABRHS, Class of 1976, Nara, September 24, 2016. Item 16, request to dispose of obsolete material, Acton Memorial Library. And item 17, committee appointment, Ken Kozik, full member, Zoning Board of Appeals, from associate. And why don't I take the hold by Katie before we get to my hold? You held,
Number 10?
yeah.
Charlie, if you want to speak to it, I did want to clarify, too, that it's worded where it sounds like John Churchill's a member of the Acton-Boxborough
Yeah.
Regional School Committee, but it's actually the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee's recommendation for the at-large member appointment to the Capital Planning
Right.
Committee. And when we set up the charge, we set 2 at-large members and said that the Board of Selectmen would pick one and the school committee would pick another. So that's what this is. Was that your concern?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Aronson, would you identify yourself? That's it? Okay, good. Yeah, it was, I hadn't read the language carefully. Okay. On item 8, which I held, the reason I held this is because this is an amendment of a site plan permit that was issued in 1980, and it is the site of the former Vanash Flowers. It has been heard by a couple of boards or reviewed by a couple of boards, and the fact is, under the current zoning bylaw, there is no requirement for a new site plan application or hearing, which is why it's appropriate that we not have a hearing with the full-blown formalities. But I thought that it would be good to make sure people on the committee understand what's going on. And I asked Mr. Bartle, the town planner, to be here in case there were questions that I can't answer, but this is basically a proposal to incorporate part of the building, the front of the lot, into a new building that will be a show place for cars. Alpha Cars is the proponent, the new owner of the property. They have a facility in Boxborough, and basically they will have the same thing set up at 178 Great Road. It will be for showing, displaying cars only. They are not going to be doing maintenance or repair. They'll do that at Boxborough. There is, I guess there are some channel wetlands on one boundary. Most of it is on the neighboring property, probably the property that has tailgaters and the bicycle shop, but the applicants are going to clean that up. It's full of invasive plants, and they're going to clean that out and then plant native plants. The Conservation Commission has reviewed the project and granted an order last week authorizing the project with the provision that the applicants provide a landscaping plan that will be approved by the Natural Resources Director. The Design Review Board has conferred with the applicant, and a number of their, or maybe all of their recommendations have been incorporated into the design that is now proposed for our approval. And the Board of Appeals also, in our file, had previously reviewed a proposal to expand the structure, and that was granted by a waiver from the ZBA. So I don't know if anybody has any questions beyond that for which the town planner could provide further information, because otherwise we can vote on this and let him leave. But anyhow, so with that understanding, if everybody is okay with that, we could have a motion to approve the entire consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you.
Thank you.
While we have time, I need to talk more slowly. We still have 10 minutes. Under Selectmen's business, there is a listing for comprehensive 40B permit 313945 Martin Street. I should just mention that we are not going to be having a discussion about that project because it is our understanding that the proponents of the project are withdrawing the application, which has been the subject of a lot of discussion in the past few months, and will be filing a revised plan. That is all I know, and so if anybody on the board or in the audience has questions, I can't answer them. Perhaps the town planner could answer, but anyhow, any questions? I don't know, we could move on to the transfer station sticker fee or some of the other items on Selectmen's business, or we could just sit here.
What about
We could do
fall
number
town
6.
meeting? Yeah, I was gonna say fall town meetings,
I'm
probably.
ready to do number 6, yeah.
Okay.
You want to do the 6?
No.
No? What would you recommend we do?
To start the transfer station discussion.
Okay. Mr. York? Corey's excited, he'll be done early.
Good evening. I'm here tonight just to present the transfer station fee recommendations now that we have sort of the first 10 months of the pay-as-you-throw program underway. As you know, we went through a series of public meetings starting in the summer of 2014, right up to the implementation in September 1st, in which we enacted the sticker fees for access and the trash bag fees, as we show up here on the slide, as the non-senior full access is $100 and the senior full access is $10, and then the associated bag costs that go with that. The interesting thing that we saw as we started the program September 1st, as you can look in the photos, you can see on September 3rd, it was pretty indicative of what we saw for volume of trash prior to pay-as-you-throw. But amazingly, 2 weeks in, we saw a significant drop of trash, and we saw a significant increase in compliance with the program. The staff did a lot of work talking with people and educating people and that. And then by about 4 to 6 weeks in, it really dropped to what we're seeing now for trash, which has dropped down quite a bit. Enforcement's been very minimal. People have, like I said, have really complied with it. The people that come in that don't have Acton bags, the staff will talk to them. They'll pay at the gate. We don't refuse their trash. We just ask them to pay and get the bags next time. Probably a handful of instances that they didn't make it to the person. They would call me and I'd go through their trash looking for any kind of correspondence. So we'd send letters, but it was really only to about maybe, I think we sent 5 or 6 letters. One was sent to the same person twice. But it really went well. So as we started looking at the numbers over the first 10 months, you can see in August, right before the program, was a spike, which we expected. People were kind of doing that final flush. But overall, over the course of the 10 months, we saw about a trash reduction of about 36% of the tonnage. So it has progressively stayed down below from what we've seen in the last few years. I put the last couple of years up just so you can kind of see that trend kind of staying below, the green being this current fiscal year as we were going through it. As we also looked at the recycling, we looked at sort of the dual stream that we do now with the mixed paper and commingle. I know a lot of people that were talking prior to pay-as-you-throw, and myself, we saw a lot of cardboard and paper in the transfer station. Now with this program, you don't really see that, and we did see an increase of about 26% in that revenue recycling stream. The commingles has been sort of up and down. Right now, over those 10 months, we're seeing about a little over a 5% reduction. And talking to a couple other communities, they saw the same thing. Nobody has a reason why yet, what that trend is, but we're kind of just watching that to see what the story is. On the flip side, we're looking at sticker sales to see what happened since pay-as-you-throw. For the full access for senior, non-senior, we saw a drop of about 5% in those sticker sales. On the flip side, for recycling, we've seen that increase over 260%. So we're kind of watching those numbers go. As far as the senior citizen program for full access and recycling, that has grown on both sides. So it's really been sort of the non-senior sticker sales side that we're watching. We saw a decline. We're watching see how that goes. The staff has commented since about late winter, early spring. There have been some residents that have commented that they left in anticipation of pay-as-you-throw, and that they've started coming back. So what we're proposing for the fees is to kind of keep it status quo, and we kind of wanted to go through this next sticker season to see if that trend shows up. But usually in the first 2 to 3 months is where we see the majority of the sticker sales, so I wanted to see if those numbers are higher than what we saw under the first year. And then from there, we can kind of get an idea of the numbers that we're seeing this year, if those are sort of constant or if we're going to be increasing or decreasing. So for now, I think I'd just like to keep the fees where they are and just kind of monitor what's happening. But overall, we have seen the trash tonnage drop like it was projected, and the recycling has gone up. The recycling market is kind of volatile, and unfortunately, those costs have jumped around. But I know like our scrap metal pricing that we were getting, which was one of our bigger money makers, so to speak, it kind of dropped, but it's coming back now. So we're hoping that will improve over the course of the season too. So that's pretty much an update to what we see so far. So.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Anybody? Katie?
Well, first of all, thank you, Corey, and congratulations on the Complete Streets grant as well. I think that's really great. But getting to this, thank you for bringing this together. So just a question, the program seems to be working very much as we sort of thought it would and expected it would based on the experiences of the other communities that have switched to pay-as-you-throw in terms of trash reduction and general stability of the users of the transfer station. I know you said that the recycling market's been a bit volatile, and I've heard that in the news as well, and I'm just wondering, with the change of the reduction in the commingle and the increase in paper, and the changes, to go to pay-as-you-throw, financially speaking, does it look, fairly, stable to keep the prices where we are now and for another year? It's not impacting our enterprise fund?
No, we had a fund balance in there that we were able to utilize sort of this transition, and I think we'll, if it stays like this if it stays constant like what's happening right now, we might be looking at an adjustment in a future year or so, but right now I think we're stable enough to sustain that. So.
Okay, good. And just, I'll add my comment. I moved in December of last year, and so started using the transfer station, and I have to say I've very much enjoyed it, and I think, we'll probably hear other anecdotal evidence as well, and so my personal anecdote is that I take 1 8-gallon bag of trash every other week on average because of the amount of recycling that you're able to do, and in particular the composting. And so I think that when that was added, it was a really great boon, and I really appreciate the efforts that you guys have gone to expand kind of the non-trash options for people to get things out of the trash stream. And just using the composting over the past few months, it seems when I go there that there's more and more in it. So hopefully that means more and more people are using it. Do you guys have a sense of how many people use the compost option?
I don't have solid numbers, but I know even from when it came out of the gate, we didn't do a lot of advertising, and it really took off by itself. Green Acton and other people were pushing that. We also do the at-home recycling. We bought off the state bid. So those were moving out too, but we quickly had to add, we had 3 totes out there, we quickly had to add that 4th one, and we had to double the collections. So they will empty it on Monday, and then they come back again on Friday. So when they're emptying it on Mondays, they're only really getting Friday and Saturday's volume, and they're fairly full on that. So, and the good thing is with that program does cost, but we have been able to get dividends, sort of money back from the state for doing certain recycling options. So we've been able to offset that cost through that program. So so far it's been working very well, and we haven't had a lot of contamination in it. So we were concerned about, we did have somebody dump a couple bags of clothes in it. Yes. I was more worried about plastic bags than that, but but for the most part, it's been clean, and the person who takes it and compost it has been happy with
Been
the
pleased,
quality
yeah.
as well.
I will say, my boyfriend got yelled at one time by somebody because the town sells compostable bags, which is what I use for the compost, and he was putting it in, some guy thought it was a plastic bag, and anyway, so there are people there that are at the transfer station that are quite vigilant, so I think they help as well with, but as you mentioned with the trash as well, most people are pretty compliant, it's just a few that aren't, and it sounds like maybe this the same person a couple of times, so not to be unexpected. But anyways, I think personally it's gone very well, and by the numbers that we've seen here, it's gone very well, and just want to thank you for leading this and working on this effort, and I'm excited to keep it going.
Let me read this notice for the 7:30 hearing, and then we'll resume the discussion of pay-as-you-throw. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on August 8, 2016 at 7:30 p.m., rescheduled from July 11, 2016, in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 in Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, for an order to show cause for an alleged liquor license violation under NGL Chapter 38, Section 34, Red, White, and Brew, 578 Massachusetts Ave, Acton, Mass. The documentation can be inspected at Town Hall during normal business hours. Other comments? Franny, did you have something? Yep, go ahead.
I will look forward to hearing more. I'm really happy that it's going so well. And the kind of thing, I just wanted to say the kind of things I'm going to be looking for in a year is the kind of things people have talked to me about. Occasionally, I've heard people say comments about the design or the size of the bags, or the question of stickers on bags or weight instead of bags, all those issues. Occasionally, people come and talk about them. And I also had a concern because I had heard from my trash pickup, because I get trash picked up by a private hauler, and they were telling me that same month that it started, they had this amazing, gigantic leap in number of Acton clients, and so I worried a little bit that would affect the look of good news, like, are we really as a town decreasing it? So I hope we can get a handle on all that data to make sure that we really are, as a town, decreasing our trash. But as a program, it looks like it's going really well, and it even affects me thinking about it. Even though I don't bring my trash to the transfer station, just reading about it and learning about it has made me think more and separate even more carefully. And I'm close to getting a recycling permit so that I can take advantage of the parts that aren't done by the private hauler.
Ching-Sung, anything?
The only comment I had is that there's still one piece of information that I asked for last year when we did this that I'm not seeing, which is the retention rate on the stickers. And this is not whether or not how many stickers you sold, but whether or not an individual who purchased a sticker in fiscal year 15 has purchased a sticker in fiscal year 16. Last year, you said, Corey, that you had this information, and so I was interested to see it, what your historical retention rates were, as well as what your retention rate was from fiscal 15 to fiscal 16. And this will speak to something Franny mentioned, which is whether or not people were changing their trash disposal method from using the transfer station to using a private trash hauling service. The number of stickers that you sell doesn't necessarily indicate this information. It's correlated, but the information will be told by whether or not an individual who purchased a sticker last year purchased one this year. And so I was interested in seeing that information and would still be interested in seeing that information going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if that's possible. I mean, if you can work on that at some point. It'd be interesting, obviously, to determine whether we're retaining, if customer mix is changing, or if what's going on. I would just say that I'm a big fan of the new approach in large part, not entirely though. I mean, I believe in being environmentally friendly. I'm a big recycler. I also have a compost. I have 3 compost piles in my backyard in the woods. Very casual, and I'm really delighted with the little composting buckets because they compost things that I can't put in our, like, bones and corks. I probably said at a prior meeting that I discarded about 5 years collection of corks from wine bottles that I just couldn't stand to throw out, but I didn't know, I thought, God, maybe I can make little trivets or something, and then I thought I'd have to make 500 trivets to use up all the corks, and I never got around to it. So I find, as Katie has, that they're very well used, and I understand that the fact that some people throw their compostable stuff in plastic bags into the buckets isn't as big an issue as it would seem to be to me, because I guess the folks on the receiving end are able to sort it out. Right, I guess, because I asked you once, I guess, about that, the fact that every time I went, I would look in and I'd see some buckets that were just food stuff, and then the other buckets that had a bunch of plastic bags in it, and you know, would seem that at some point it would be more plastic bag filled than food filled, but they haven't, the people who take the compostable material haven't complained.
Yeah, I've seen the bags in there. That's one of my concerns when I was asking them, but because for them, it's more labor to have to pull those out. But so far, he hasn't had that concern. So he was commenting that he's had bigger issues dealing with restaurants when they have teenage kids that are just trying to make some money and go. So.
It's from plastic cups
Yeah,
and
so
forks and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, so far we've been pretty successful with that, yeah.
No, I think it's a great operation, and of course, obviously, there was a big drop for me from the annual fee of $210. And especially for somebody from a household of two, that would generate one 8-gallon bag every couple of weeks. Although 8-gallon bags have been out of stock at Donaldson, so I found myself with a bunch of 15-gallon bags, and that's what I've been using. And so maybe you bought all the stock of 8-gallon bags.
They have them at Roche Brothers and stuff too.
But anyhow, but no, it's great, and I go even less frequently. But one of the things that I do, and that some other people do when they compost, is they put the food scraps in a bucket in the freezer. So now I have 2 buckets in the freezer. We obviously have no other food in our freezer, but one is for backyard compost and the other is for the transfer station compost. Every once in a while, my husband throws something in one of them that doesn't belong there, and I chew them out. But basically, what that does is it keeps the smell from, filling the trash can. And that was something that was my father's innovation when we were young, and he got tired of having raccoons and every other animal trying to get into the trash can when it was out on the curb. He said, okay, we're going to put food scraps, anything that generates a smell in the freezing compartment somehow, and I got the habit from very young. So, but that's a suggestion for people who complain about the smell. Don't let it get smelly. So anyhow, comments from the audience? Anybody? No? Okay, well, Tara.
Whole Foods collects corks. So there's a big, huge bin full of corks there. So we have corks now at the transfer station, or we? Oh, yay, thank you.
Thank you. So you need, a vote from us to approve continuing the rates as they are?
I move to keep the transfer station sticker rates and fees as recommended by the engineer, director. What's your title, Corey?
Second.
Katie moved and Franny seconded.
DPW director / town engineer.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Thank you, Corey, very much.
Thank you, Corey.
Can I second the congratulations? Corey, that was so exciting to see that we got all $400,000 worth of all these great complete streets projects. So, yeah.
So are these, that actually was a question I had, are these all, because I was confused when I saw I think the thing that you had sent me of all the things you'd sent in about it seemed like some of them had different years, but they all have to be completed in this year? It was like different priority levels, or?
Yeah, we went through their 3-tiered system.
Right.
In the first year, we had to prove we had a policy that was acceptable to them. In the second year, we had to develop sort of an overall prioritization plan and sort of how we thought it would be phased. And then for tier 3, because they're giving us very limited time to implement, from there, then you could choose projects that you thought were actually doable within before next June.
Okay.
That's why you see we sort of staggered it based on sort of the public output and sort of the criteria, but then we had to hand-pick the ones that we really thought were shovel-ready to get done, so.
Okay. So the ones on that short list you sent are the ones that will be done this
Yes,
year? And is that by end of June, end of the fiscal year, or end of?
Pretty much, yeah,
Oh,
by the
okay,
end of
okay.
June, it's got to be
That's great.
complete and submitted, so,
Wow, all right, they got a busy year.
yes.
Thank you, Corey, very much. That's great, great news. All right, now back to the hearing, the notice for which I read it at 7:30 about Red, White, and Brew. I know there are people here, I assume that people representing Red, White, and Brew, okay? And then I know people from the police department. Franny, I think as clerk, you should swear in everybody who's going to be offering testimony of any sort. So once we get everybody in here, everybody who is going to be offering any kind of testimony or might be offering testimony, would you all stand and raise your hands, and so the clerk can swear you in?
Everybody should stand up who's going to be, and I'll ask you all at once. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on this matter?
Thank you very much. I guess we'll let you start off with an introduction of what this is about.
Thank you, Janet. Sergeant
By the way,
Rentschler.
I should mention that Jessica Wall from Town Council's office is here to keep us on the straight and narrow legally.
Glad to help, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Myself, Sergeant Rentschler. This is Detective Keeler and Officer Mahoney. They were all working the night of Tuesday, May 31st. That is the night in question. That's why we're here. On that night, Detective Keeler was working a plainclothes shift. His normal routine is to work in plainclothes as the detective. He was traveling through West Square at 10:04 in the evening. He noted a motor vehicle parked in front of the Middlesex Savings Bank. And what's peculiar about this, at 10:04, most of the businesses were all closed in West Acton, including the Red, White, and Brew should have been closed. D. Capri was closed. The Middlesex Bank, just the ATM is open. So he noticed a motor vehicle parked on Mass Ave in front of the Middlesex Savings Bank with two young individuals parked inside the same. The detective continued to observe this vehicle. He looped back around through West Square and came up the alleyway between Red, White, and Brew and D. Capri. So while he was in the alleyway, he noticed two individuals walk across Mass Ave from the Red, White, and Brew establishment towards that parked motor vehicle. The two individuals were carrying several packages of beer, a 30-pack and two 12-packs of beer. The beer was then loaded into the motor vehicle in the trunk. One individual got into the rear of the motor vehicle, and then another subject walked back across Mass Ave towards Red, White, and Brew. The vehicle then began to drive away. At that time, Detective Keeler effected a motor vehicle stop. After stopping the vehicle, Detective Keeler determined that all three of the occupants in the vehicle were under the age of 21. The oldest in the vehicle was aged of 19. There was two 19-year-olds and one 18-year-old. The youths were searched for alternative forms of identification. No other IDs were found other than their regular Massachusetts-issued IDs. The vehicle was then searched further. The beer that Detective Keeler observed being carried across the street was located in the trunk, as well as some other alcohol. But the beer in particular was cold to the touch and consistent with what Detective Keeler observed being put into the vehicle. While the vehicle was stopped, Detective Keeler had called in for backup. I arrived on the scene. I was working a patrol shift that night. I arrived to assist Detective Keeler. He then went across the street to speak to the store clerk. He asked the store clerk if the individual he was seen walking across the street with and the individual he helped carry the beer to the car with had ever produced any ID. The store clerk stated that he had not. The detective learned that the youths did not enter the store. Rather, the beer was sold and ordered by a prearranged phone call. So the clerk had met the youths outside and made the transaction outside of the store. At that time, the clerk was arrested for furnishing alcohol to a minor, or actually 3 counts of that, sale and delivery of alcohol to a minor. Once in custody, the clerk had an odor. It was determined, as the interactions became more consistent, it was noted that the clerk had an odor of alcoholic beverage on his breath. Once he was back at the station, we administered a breathalyzer to the clerk. At that time, at the station, he registered results of .35, or .035, excuse me, which would indicate the clerk was consuming some alcohol while he was engaged in his duties as an employee of a liquor establishment. Also, Detective Keeler had a subsequent conversation with the youths before they were released, and they related to Detective Keeler that the reason why they came to Acton on that particular night was that the Red, White, and Brew was known as an easy place to make a purchase because IDs were not asked for. The youths were not from Acton. They were all summoned into court for minor possession because the transaction was completed, so they were summoned into court, as well as the clerk was charged with 3 counts of furnishing alcohol to a minor. Detective Keeler, like I said, is here to answer any more questions if the board has any, as well as Officer Mahoney, who he dealt at the tail end of the investigation, assisting the owner securing the business at the end of the night.
Okay, thank you, Detective Rentschler. Does the board have any questions for the police officers, any of them? Before we hear from the store representatives, any questions? Okay. I think maybe we'll ask now for representatives of Red, White, and Brew to come up and maybe offer a statement in your own behalf, whatever it might be. Please state your name and for the benefit of the stenographer.
My name is Navrat Patel. I was working at that night, and I'm really sorry that I did all this. I made a mistake, but didn't know that I was serving alcohol to a minor. That's what it was.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Patel? Katie?
So, Mr. Patel, did these people call on the phone and
Yeah.
order alcohol?
Yeah, at 9:45, they called me saying that they were gonna come by, and then I actually waited for them, and then I actually started to close the store, but then I seen a car pull up, and the guy came inside, and he was like, "Can I get some alcohol?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'm about to close."
And so you brought it out to them?
I helped them, brought it out, because I wanted to close the store.
And have you had people call you to order alcohol before? Has this happened in the past?
They always call me, sometimes.
They'll call and say what they want ahead of time, and do you...
No, they didn't say that. They
Okay.
wanted this, like, Busch Light and stuff like that. But they were like, "Oh, I'm coming in like 5 minutes." That's what they told me.
Why do people call you ahead of time to tell you they're
Because
coming?
we closed the store a little bit early.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay. And do you know, does your store have policies around serving, and have you been trained on those policies?
Not really.
No.
But I've been learning since I was working at stores way before, so I was trained how to check IDs and all that.
But your current store does not have a policy in place, or not that you know of?
Policy as in,
About how to serve or check IDs?
no.
Okay, thank you.
Rennie, did you?
My question was answered. I think it was answered.
Okay. So, Ching Sung, any questions? All right.
I wanted to say why this concerns me so much is because these kids were from Concord. They had apparently heard that they could.
We always check IDs, but I was in a hurry that day to close the store. That's why I forgot to check the ID. It was a mistake.
So, I like, philosophically, I like people admitting mistakes and moving on and learning and us improving as a town. I just really want to make sure that we don't end up with people drunk on the roads.
Yeah.
Or underage
Yeah.
harming
Sorry
themselves or
about
others
that.
due to alcohol. And that's what's most important to me, to come out of this.
All right, I have a question. The store apparently did have a reputation for being easy to get alcohol from if you were underage. Are you the only person who typically works behind the counter?
My
or-
parents work in the morning, and I work during the night shifts.
So you're working during the time when probably it's more likely that you're going to have underage people trying to buy alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if
Well,
you're,
not underage, but that typical night, I had an underage coming in and bought the beverage.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how valid the reputation is that your shop is easy to get alcohol from if a person is underage, but obviously there must have been some sort of reputation. Concord does, I believe they have places, maybe they don't have places where you can buy alcohol. I don't think they're a dry town, but it's interesting that they came to Acton. But as Katie's already asked about this, I've been learning about the alcoholic beverage laws of the Commonwealth, but you haven't gone through a formal training to sort of understand what all of the regulations are that apply. We typically deal more often with restaurants that serve alcohol to drink in the restaurant. We less frequently deal with package stores that have licenses to sell alcohol, not for consumption in the store. So this is a little bit different, but obviously it's important for you as an employee of a package store to understand the laws that apply to you. And yeah, it would be good for us to have some reassurance that you will card everybody. I know there are places who will card even an old person like me because they take absolutely no chance. They don't care if you look as if you're old enough, they're not going to take a chance, make any assumptions. And that way, there's nobody, some of us are very flattered to be carded on the other end, maybe you're less insulted because if you're a young adult, you know that your parents are also getting carded and it becomes a source of humor. But I think it's important. I know that when I go to Donnellan's, they sell alcohol. They have people who are under 18 working the cash registers. If you bring a bottle of wine to the cash register, the kids will not touch. They can't touch the bottle. It's a matter of law. They aren't allowed to touch the alcohol. So it's pretty strictly observed in the places that are subject to the laws, and I think it's important for you to understand. All right.
I've got another question.
Yes, Katie.
Can I ask what you or your parents have done since this incident to improve?
We've been checking everyone's IDs.
Okay, but you
Like
still don't
this.
have a policy, so and is it just the three of you that work there? There's nobody else that works
No.
there at all? Okay, even still, you should have a policy in place and training, even if it's for the three of you, on that policy, because this isn't, as Franny said, it concerns her a lot, and it concerns me a lot too, frankly. I appreciate that this was a mistake and that you're admitting to the mistake, but it doesn't frankly sound like it was a one-off incident, and I'm concerned about other people that have been served underage, and it's not acceptable. Having one of these licenses is a privilege, and you need to take that very seriously, and I'm worried that it's not being taken seriously.
Franny, go ahead.
I think that I feel like I read in something that I've been reading today that you're not allowed to drink anything while you're working in a package store. Was that
Well,
right?
it's licensed, they're licensed to sell alcohol not for consumption on the premises, so the implication is that you're not supposed to be consuming alcohol on the premises.
On the premises.
Under that
Even
license.
even if you're an employee.
Well, if your store has a license, yeah, and
So-
presumably he has to pay for the alcohol that he's consuming. complicated, but that is part of, I think, what's encompassed in the
Yeah.
charges, is that he was consuming alcohol under pursuant at a location that's licensed only to sell for not consumption on the premises, so.
So if I can sort of summarize in my mind to make sure we're deciding what we want to do, it's been determined by the courts and everybody, and by the conversations and the plea, that yes, and, there was alcohol being consumed on the premises, and there was alcohol being sold to underage people. Is that right?
We're not imposing the criminal penalty.
No, I know, but I just wanted to confirm what we're agreeing,
Why don't we have
has happened.
Jessica weigh in?
The information that we
Yeah,
have.
just a quick point on that. So the board has to make its own findings about whether there's a violation based on the evidence that it hears in the hearing today. So once all the testimony's been taken, we'll close the hearing, deliberate, make a determination about whether there are violations as to sales to minors, and then also to consuming on the premises.
Okay.
And then if the board makes those findings, the board will make a recommendation and decide what penalties or revocation, modification, suspension is appropriate.
Okay, so I just wanted to confirm, so that's what I thought, so that's what we're finding, those two things, after we hear anything anybody wants to say.
And just one other note on that, the standard is satisfactory proof, that you all feel that there's satisfactory proof to show the violations.
Okay.
All right, well,
So,
I have a question about the counts. When I was looking at the paperwork, the 3 counts, the same language, and I thought, okay, one count must be for serving underage, another count is for what, consuming alcohol on the premises? I couldn't figure out what the 3 counts were, because the language looked exactly the same for each count.
No, it
but-
was, because it was 3 individuals that were delivered to.
Okay, so each one of those, okay, and is each one of those subject to a fine of $2,000
Yes.
or prison time? That's
That's
by
in
a
the-
district court, but...
Yeah, that's in the language of the complaint. Mr. Patel might tell you that he arrived at a resolution short of that. That's is part of his arrangement with the court.
Okay.
But the court matter has been closed out in regards to Mr. Patel.
Okay. Go, Katie?
So I'm feeling pretty satisfactorily that we found that there was alcohol furnished to a minor, but Ms. Brillo, can you speak about whether or not you were drinking on the premise that night?
I had a couple of drinks.
In the...
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then I feel that there's satisfactory evidence for that as well.
I don't know if we want to also just do everything in one fell swoop. We need to make findings, and then we need to decide what, if anything, we want to do.
Right, first we have to close the
Yeah,
hearing.
and I don't know if it's a good time now to find out, I see that the deputy police chief is here, and standing in for the chief, right? Maybe on vacation, but anyhow, no, he never takes vacation, does he? But whether you have a recommendation about an appropriate action that we should order with respect to the violation if we find one?
We
You
probably
do?
should close the hearing, find violations, and then ask for a
Excuse me?
recommendation. I said, probably makes sense if we close the hearing, find
Yeah.
what violations we're going to find, and then ask for a recommendation so he knows what we've
To keep it
officially
separate?
found.
All right, does somebody want to move?
So I'll
make a
move
motion
to
about,
close the hearing.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There might be
Okay.
other comments from,
If there are public comments. We've got several people running this meeting.
Well, I just would like to ask a couple questions, if you wouldn't mind. So is there a specific penalty that happens if you find that there was satisfactory evidence? Are there options relative to satisfactory evidence, like you want to have a warning, or, and how does that relate to what happened at the court? So is the court action separate to what you're doing, or is the court action dependent on what you're doing? I'd just like to have a couple of questions answered for that. Thank you.
I think that that's separate, but I'll let Attorney Wall, maybe you'd like to respond? Thank you.
They are separate proceedings, so the court action is separate from the hearing that we're having here tonight. If the board finds a violation, there are multiple options in terms of discipline that they can pursue, and it's in their discretion what they'd like to do. They could modify the terms of the license, they could suspend the license for a certain number of days, they could revoke the license. There are multiple options for what they can do.
Thank you. And what was the court action? What ended up at the court?
Oh, the resolution of the court action? I'm going to let Detective Rentschler.
Mr. Patel pled out to a pretrial probation with for a short term. During that term, he was to perform hours of community service. I'm pretty sure that that obligation has been met. And the court case is, I believe has it been closed, or it's going to be closed in a few weeks? It's closed now? Okay. So he's satisfied his obligation to the court.
Thank you.
Thank you. So where did we leave? We were moving to close the hearing now. Katie, you want to
Yes, I will
remove?
move to close the hearing.
Somebody going to second?
I want a second, but I had a...
You can second it, and for
then
purposes of
comment?
discussion, if you want to. I mean, if you have something
Okay.
else to say before we close.
Okay, so I should say what I want to say before we close, or does it
You
not matter?
go
I'll
ahead and say,
second.
go ahead and say what you have to say.
Oh,
It's fine. I don't care. You can
I
either
wanted
second-
to know if there was going to be further training, or would that be part of the penalty?
That's part of our decision, after
Okay, then I
we find
won't-
violations.
okay, I second.
Okay. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to close the hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right, the next matter to take up is finding violations. Does somebody want to move, or should we discuss further?
I would prefer that we talk about, I guess, are we supposed to find the violations first and then talk about
Yes.
what we do in respect to that?
Yes.
Yes, the violations are the first matter.
Okay. Then I guess I move that we find violation of the liquor license under, for alcohol consumed on premises, as well as alcohol being furnished to minors.
What's your second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Now, we get to the matter that everybody's been eager to get to, which is recommended action. I don't want to call it punishment, but, yes.
Good evening.
Deputy Chief.
Police Department has a dual recommendation. At the low end, we'd recommend a warning based on a first violation that we're aware of, or short suspension based on the seriousness of the nature of the incident that took place.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Sure, I mean, I'll say, I mean, I think, honestly, these are two relatively serious and concerning incidents to me. That somebody would drink while working, who's employed by a package store, will drink on the job, and then serve alcohol to minors and help them bring it out to their car is really concerning to me. And I think that a short suspension is warranted here as a sign, and hopefully, frankly, a wake-up call that you need to have really strict policies. And I would like to see that we have a policy that they are required to provide us with a policy for the store and proof that the employees have been trained on it, because otherwise I'm worried that this is just going to continue.
Franny, you have?
Yeah, I would add to that I don't know is there tips training type thing for selling alcohol? Is there a difference in the training? Does
Lisa
anyone
seems
know?
to know. Lisa?
There is?
Yes.
Lisa. Yeah, Lisa, you want to give Lisa the, wait. You've got to talk.
There's on-premise and off-premise training, so restaurant and package store.
Who gives those trainings?
They're online trainings.
Okay. So I would want them to definitely get that training, because it would,
And maybe certified
part
to
of-
the
as
police
part of the
department,
policy.
or certified to us or to the police department that they've done it.
I could go either with a warning or a short suspension, because it is the first time, and you've recently come into, you've recently purchased this business, and how long have you been in
We
business?
can't ask them questions
Yeah.
now because we
Oh, that's
closed the
right.
hearing.
Okay. Well,
I don't think they've had it long, so.
because I remember going in and hearing that it was slow to get the license, or so there was
Yeah.
something that was slow in getting started, and so I but I do like the idea of really getting it across, the seriousness. So I could go either way, Katie, from what you
Yeah, I'm
said.
thinking like a day, not, a long
Right,
time.
so,
I would agree that we definitely need to put, the training and the policies and whatnot as, to be completed within a certain time frame. I don't know, think something like 30 or 60 days is a reasonable time frame to get that completed. And I would also recommend a one-day suspension.
I would second if that was a motion. I don't know. if that-
I'll make an official motion, or unless you had something you wanted to add, Janet.
No, what did you say about suspension?
So I said a day. I mean, I think it's more as just a sign and an understanding that this isn't okay,
Okay, so we're basically talking about one-day suspension, some sort of online training for somebody under, whatever, Section 15, having to do with package store conduct, and then the policies in place regarding appropriate
Yeah, so
conduct in a-
I'd say I'd make a motion to require that as a condition of their license. They have to provide the Board of Selectmen with a copy of their policy for service and proof that all employees have completed training. It's on-site, what's it called, Lisa? Tips
It
off
shouldn't be for
premise training, and that their license is suspended for one day.
Okay, but the policy shouldn't be about, I mean, when you talk
Or
about service, you're talking about, I always think
Serving
of
means
beverages
selling, I
on-site.
guess, I don't know the right
About
language.
their sales, their
Sales of
their
alcohol.
policy, their policy
Right.
regarding the sale of alcohol, okay, okay. So there's a second for those three, the three-part,
Second.
any further discussion? All the,
I will just say that the reason I think this is so serious is because it is youth. I mean, under 21, it just feels, this is where I always hear the problems happening, the accidents, the unsafe behavior, people getting hurt, and so it just seems like this is the interface between, right where they buy it is where, if they can't buy it, that can't happen, and it feels very important. So I'm glad, actually, that we are doing a one-day suspension in addition to the other things.
no, I agree, okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Thank you very much, all of you. And I thank you for coming, and I hope to hear from here after. We hope never to hear from you again. So we hope that you have a reputation for being very strict
Yeah.
and very impossible to get for underage buyers to get alcohol from. So
Just one follow-up point
Yeah.
about the suspension. Is there a day of the week that the board would find appropriate?
Gosh, I don't. Does it just?
A Saturday, yes.
A Saturday?
Sunday, you have reduced hours, the rest of the week isn't. I mean, honestly, if we're going to make it a real statement, then a Saturday's if you want to make it more of a show statement, a Wednesday, but 'cause who's buying alcohol
It
on
could be
Wednesday?
Friday, too, but.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know. So do
Do
we
you
have
want
to?
to
So should we
don't
say
know.
that within a certain amount of time, like a Saturday in the month of September? or
I mean, if
something?
you're going to do that, I would just say before the end of the year. Because, I mean, we are,
Do we, is
I
it
don't
just,
think it-
usually do we just say the next Saturday?
I've seen it in Alcohol and Beverage Commission decisions that it's just listed as a
As a
day.
stay,
If there's
okay.
no specific day of the week
And
described.
and so people just, they
So it's
just,
like a one-day suspension, but there's not further information about what day of the week it is. So it's in the board's discretion whether they'd like to add that or whether they'd like to just leave it as a one-day suspension.
I don't really care.
I mean.
I would be amenable to just leaving it as a one-day suspension.
If that's
Yeah.
what's normally
I
done.
don't want to agonize over the day of the week.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because it's almost, it's nominal to begin with, and, you know, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. So there's no need to make a new motion or change anything about
Yeah, we'll do
Okay, good, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, though. Okay, you're all set, thank you. Bye. All right. Now we have, okay, Acton Transit Update and Presentation. By the way, if anybody is in the audience waiting to hear about the 40B permit on Martin Street, I announced earlier that we are not going to be having a substantive discussion about that because it's our understanding that the applicants are withdrawing the application and will be filing a revised one at some point. So there's really no point in our having any kind of a discussion about a plan that's going to go away, so. So, Acton Transit update. Oh, I didn't see Doug moving there. Okay.
Good evening. I requested to appear before the Board of Selectmen to give you an update on the Acton Transit. I think that with the budget season coming up soon, this might be a topic of discussion, and it would be good for the Selectmen to know how the program is going and get a feel for what's happening. So we launched the service in November 2nd, 2015. We have a 1-hour round trip. There are 11 stops that the Acton Transit serves. The service runs 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The stops that we include are Sachem Way, Nagog Woods, Avalon Drive, Goods Plaza, Acton Pharmacy, Windsor Green, the MBTA station, the COA facility, Kmart, and the Town Hall Library. Our initial advertising, we had a story covered in the Beacon. We've had it on cable TV. Then we did some follow-up advertising in April with a direct mailing to all the people that were adjacent to the stops. The issues that we have found, afternoon traffic, I'm sure that you try traveling around in Acton in the afternoon, it gets really boggy, and route was impacted sometimes up to 30 minutes late, and so we had to sort of figure out how to deal with that. And then we have some low ridership on some stops, and we're trying to understand why we might have that low ridership and change according to that. Our successes, we have initial high ridership. We were expecting only about 100 riders per month when we first started this. We started right off the bat with about 200. We've had good senior participation. We're having good after-school ridership. And another thing that's happening is we're getting an increasing MBTA ridership. We have flyers that we have developed and that we're giving out to people, and I have copies of them here. This is online, and it's available at the Town Hall, and this is the flyer that we mailed to people in our direct mailing. It shows where all the stops are located and the time in which the cat arrives at the stop. It also has an online program where you can track the cat's progress through the course of the day. So if it is running late, you can check that online program and stay at home and wait until the bus is about to get to your stop. I'll get into some of the changes that have happened. On the top, you'll see what the ridership was in December of 2015, and in the bottom is what we're seeing in June of 2015. So people boarding the bus initially in December, we had a early morning boarding, that most of the activity was happening in the morning. As the time has progressed, in June, we're seeing most of the boarding is occurring either in late morning or early afternoon. And you'll notice that there's quite more peaks than what were initially happening in December. On departing the bus, again, we were seeing a very early morning usage of the bus in December, and that has changed dramatically, where it's more the middle of the day where we see the most users on the bus. This is a graph showing the individual stations. In December, the high ridership stations were Sachem Way, Goods Plaza, Windsor Green, and Kmart. That has changed a little bit in June. After we did the mass mailing, in particular to Avalon, we have seen Avalon start climbing as one of our big users, along with Sachem Way, Acton Plaza, the MBTA, and Kmart. The MBTA is very interesting because that continues to climb every month as people are understanding that they can access the train at certain times through this service. This graph gives you a better idea. So if you're looking at the upper right-hand corner, that shows you the stations that are the most active, and if you look down in the lower left-hand corner, that shows you the stations that have the least participation. The top is what we were seeing in December, and the June is on the bottom. And as you can see from this chart, Avalon has quickly moved up into the top left-hand corner in June. Sachem Way has continued to be a good stop, and MBTA station has also moved significantly up the chart in its usage. So we've been working with Transaction Associates to try to make the service better and try to understand some of the things that are happening. And one of the changes that we made was the COA and Audubon Drive. We had very low ridership, and that really shows up on the charts there, that in both December and June, they're the lowest one in the lower left-hand corner. So we've made those stops request only, and that has had a significant impact. As you can visualize, traveling in that area during certain times of day, once you go past the traffic light at School Street and then try to enter High Street, there's always a backlog of traffic there. By making that a request only, it saves the driver time. And what that enables the driver to do, especially in the afternoon, is make sure that he gets the stops at the proper time, and even have the ability to modify the route should we have a passenger that needs to go a little bit off the route. We also decided to add Great Road condominiums. We don't have any figures yet. We haven't started tabulating the people that are getting on at that location, but we have been getting requests from people that live there and wanted to access the CAT. We're looking at doing additional advertising, a direct mailing in August. We're going to target residential complexes. We're going to reach out to the businesses along the route. We have reached out to Roach Brothers, and they have displayed a poster at their store advertising the service. We're also going to be working with Corey York. We're very happy that he got the Complete Streets grant, because one of the things that's going to be within that is signage for the stops for Cross Acton. And we'll continue with cable TV and the Beacon. Cable TV actually filmed the route, and they're in the process of making a little documentary on the CAT that we hope to have up pretty soon. And as I said, the installation of stop signs. The other anomaly, you just never know where popular culture is going. And apparently, Cross Acton Transit is a good place for people to capture Pokemons. And so we have been seeing more young people on the bus capturing those Pokemons, which is a good thing because they're getting out, they're learning about the stops, and they're very safe on the CAT. The other thing that I would also add that, well, I just got the report this weekend for the numbers in July, and in June, we had 250 riders. In July, we had 350 riders, so we went up 100. So we're going to watch that carefully to try to understand why that effect happened. Hopefully, it's because the word of mouth is getting out and people are using it more. And as I looked at the data, across the board, it was every stop increased by about 17%. It wasn't as if only one stop increased, it was across the board. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and hopefully you have a positive feeling for the service.
Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you for all of your effort on this project and, you know, staying not completely retired just for, for this project about you, which you're quite an expert. So any questions, comments from the board? I'm not going to ask you. You'll no, go ahead, Franny.
I have 3 questions and a comment. The flag locations, is there a way that you can capture those? Because, you know, you have all these stops, but are there, in addition to those, places that people are flagging it down?
That hasn't happened in very big frequency. It happens now and then. We would have to think about how to represent that on the roadway and not create too much signage, but allow people to know that this is a good place to flag down the bus. What we're really concerned is we don't want the bus to be stopped in an area that's unsafe, and so we want people to flag people at safe locations.
Yeah. And this, accessibility, I remember, I learned that we became accessible.
Yep.
And it was a little bit of a rough start. Any comment on the vehicles that we're using, or, because
well, the current vehicle that we're using is an older style vehicle that is not totally amenable to all people with handicaps. It is a handicap accessible vehicle, but we have a pledge from LRTA to give us one of their older vehicles to replace the one we're using, and we hope to implement that this month.
That's great. And I guess actually I'll turn it and say just 2 comments. One is that I wanted to acknowledge Stephen Engley, who's here. Raise your hand. He is a young man who's living and working in Acton and volunteered his time to create an app where he put together a lot of this information that Doug uses in this report, which was really helpful. And he's come to some transportation meetings. So thank you for that. I also wanted to make the comment that I've always made, which is that if we do need to increase the ridership, I think actually going to the high visibility locations and the high need locations, such as the commuters from the other side of town to the train station, early and late in the day during the commuter hours, which we weren't able to do due to staffing needs. And the schools, going really to the schools. Doug always teases me because, you know, of course the kids can walk over to Kmart or Kelly's Corner, but I do think that the visibility, you know, the parents who are lining up to pick up their kids, if they see the CAT bus there, they will more likely use it. So those are sort of things I think that we can move to if we have to. If there were any changes, those are the ones that I would promote.
Anybody else? Katie.
Doug, my only question's about first of all, thank you to you and Franny and Steve for all of your work on this. I think it's great and clearly been successful so far, and enthusiasm is growing, which is wonderful. My question was about the having the COA as, only as requested. So I get that if you get on the bus and say, I want to get off at the COA, but how do can people request from the COA that they want to pick up there? And is there like a certain time they have to call within to do that?
Correct. So what would happen is if someone wanted to go to the COA, they would call for that request.
Oh, even just to go there,
Yeah,
okay.
and then once they're there, the driver would pick them up.
Right.
On the other side, they could be at the COA and request a stop too. That I would be a little bit more concerned about in terms of the timing of that request, so that they can inform the driver and know the driver should change his route. What I've been noticing is the COA gets a lot of service from our door-to-door services, from our Roadrunner, our Dollar Ride, and the COA van. The programs do not run at the same time as the Cross-Acton Transit, so it's not advantageous to take that. And so people haven't been. And I would certainly love to service the COA, but we're just not getting any riders. And it's not working.
Right. Well, it's good to know where it is working. And kind of building off of what Franny spoke about whether the bus goes to school, even if it doesn't go there, I think if you include in your advertising, maybe specifically going to the school and putting increased advertising there at the beginning of the year and the back-to-school nights, you could tie in the Pokemon stuff, you know. But I ran into a family on my walk over here playing it. They were all stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, you know. They're clearly playing Pokemon. So, you know, I think that would be another way to get people. And then I just, you know, just a general comment for everybody listening to this and sometimes hearing numbers, and they might not sound as large as, you know, you would think. Although I'm impressed by the ridership, it being so young, but I think back about the rail shuttle, you know, that I take, and it took a little while before, but it really, after some time, a couple years, has just skyrocketed in usage, and part of that is just people understanding it and getting the word out to their friends and seeing it coming to the train station. We get so many people that stop and ask, you know, where it goes when we're stopped there. So I think over time, we'll hopefully see more and more people, and I'm really hoping the signs that we put up will be a good, you know, you're walking by and say, hey, what's this, and can kind of look into it. So I'm really excited about it, and thank you all for your work on it.
Thank you.
Ching-Sun, any questions? No? Okay, I'll ask one question. Doug, I had a question because Franny brought up the issue of accessibility, and I don't know how mass transit, public transit manages it, because I know I've been on buses in Boston or Cambridge, and I've seen what happens when somebody needs, you know, to use the wheelchair lift and everything. You know, everybody else is there, and it's kind of awkward. But you know, and there's also obviously an addition of time to the route, how long it takes and things like that. And I don't know if now they have really wonderful accessible vehicles where they just show up and it's like. And the person can walk on or wheel on and be on, you know, the vehicle in really quick order. Because obviously, for some people, maybe it doesn't matter what the schedule is. They're not holding too closely to a strict schedule. But for people who have appointments, or if somebody's going to the train station and they're beholden to the train schedule, you know, 5 minutes late is 5 minutes late and you've missed your train. So I don't know how, you know, if you're thinking ahead, I don't know how much of a demand there is, you know, if you have to provide every transportation vehicle has to be accessible, then I don't know how you're going to address the issue of holding to a certain schedule so that people know that, okay, it's going to take me 30 minutes, or it's going to take me 40 minutes, or something like that, weather permitting and that sort of thing, but not necessarily allowing for other kinds of delays. I don't know if you've sort of given some thought to how to address that, or how other transit services deal with it.
Yeah, we have given a lot of thought. We recognize that the route itself has to have enough time flexibility for occurrences happening that it won't be late. And sometimes that's traffic, and sometimes that might be certain passengers that need additional time. Our belief is that most people with disabilities are going to use the door-to-door service because their disability limits them that much, they have to do it that way. But on the other hand, we want to encourage people to utilize the service, and if they have the ability to get to a stop, we want to be able to have the ability to take them onto the bus.
It's challenging. Franny, go ahead.
I want to say about the disability, what's convenient is that even if you aren't in a wheelchair, but you just have trouble with those big steps, it's actually nice to be able to have the ramp lower and to walk on. I wanted to say, I got an email today, I don't know if she also forwarded it to the rest of the board, but from Bridget Bieber from Household Goods Recycling of Massachusetts, HGRM, and she said that like at least 3 of her employees have said they use the CAT to get there and that they really appreciated it. They had good things to say, so that was nice.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Any comments from the audience? Ms. Friedrichs?
Now that we have the CAT, I mean, relative to whether we wanted the CAT or not before, we have it now. Now it's public service, and so I feel like transportation is a right once the public transit is in place, and that we have to specifically target folks that don't have access to other resources. In particular, I noticed that we don't have a regular stop at Parker Village or in that area, and I really hope that we can do that soon. I also would like to see a way to make it possible for governmental buildings to be regular stops. Town hall, library already is, and so I guess town hall's covered. But the food pantry, for example, so that we can have a stop that on a regular basis, people know that they can get to the food pantry or not. And then I advocate for any governmental stops and food pantry to be free. So, and I don't mean like make people fill out applications and come crawling over broken glass to get their dollar free service. I think that we should have it optional. That if people can't afford it, when they walk on, we just look the other way. Hopefully we can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara.
I can address 2 of those. We're working with the town of Maynard to create a 7-loop from Maynard Center up to the train station, which would also run on Parker Street past the complex that Tara mentioned. As part of the budget that the governor passed, there was money in there to do that. The service will most likely be more centered to the commuter time, not necessarily all day, but it'll be our first step towards that. The second thing is we do have the Roadrunner go to the food pantry on a regular basis, and we generally have a full bus when we go.
Thank you. Yep, Tara?
I forgot another question or comment. That I hope that the signs are more country than city, because the aesthetic shows a lot about what we value here in town, and I would like it to be friendly. I'd like it to be wooden. I'd like the schedule to be posted on the thing with a little case. I can show you how to make those out of plastic very easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much, Doug, for the update. Go ahead, Franny.
I would just note that the sign has to meet federal requirements, and we'll do our best to make it appealing, but we do have things we have to
Would
have
like.
I just wanted to make sure I heard you right. I thought you said the signs, you wanted them to be wooden, and then you said you could show us how to make them out of plastic, or
What I meant to say is that on the wooden sign, that we could have, I can show you how to make it out of recycled plastic, these little flip-top covered, so you can put the slot in and have it, we're doing that all over the place with the mini libraries, and it'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug, very much. Maybe we'll have the anniversary update in, November? Have a celebration? Okay, thanks. All right, and now we're down to the last item, I believe. Fall town meeting, including closing the town warrant. So a little bit of discussion about what we are looking at having on the warrant potentially. Have you heard yet about the fire union?
Yes, I have. That's why I didn't want to talk about it an hour ago. But
Okay.
I have now heard they have ratified the
They have
contract.
ratified, okay.
Correct. So you have in front of you a list of 12 potential articles, and I can just go through them. The first 2 articles, amending the town bylaws for appointing a temporary moderator for town meeting, and amending town bylaws to allow for electronic voting at town meeting are two items that the moderator spoke to the board about at the last meeting. It should be at your place. Lisa, did you? Oh, wow.
I said I would do it as soon as we finish the last
I
item.
wonder why they all look the same. Okay. So those are the two that the moderator talked about at the last meeting. Since we talked about calling town meetings to deal with issues of timeliness, putting this on the fall town meeting warrant would enable us to implement at the spring town meeting, particularly if we want to get into electronic voting. Third item is the funding of the fire collective bargaining agreement. And as I said, this was ratified about an hour ago by the fire union. And this agreement would enable us to implement advanced life support or paramedic service effective July 1 of 2017. As you know, currently we're a member of SMER, which is the Central Middlesex Emergency Response Agency that provides paramedic service for the surrounding towns. It's been our goal for quite some time to do our own paramedic service because we feel we could do better response times than SMERA. So under the SMERA agreement, we have to give them notification of our intent to withdraw 6 months prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year. So by December 31st of this year, we would have to give them notice so that we could start our own advanced life support as of July 1 of 2017. So hence this contract enables us to do that, and therefore, in my opinion, it's an issue of timeliness. I apologize, I don't have some of the numbers tonight because, as I reported earlier, the HR director's father passed away over the weekend, and she's out, and I know she has the numbers, but I didn't have access to them today. I think one of the important numbers to keep in mind is that in our analysis of the advanced life support situation, us providing advanced life support will bring in, according to the consultant we hired, about $300,000 of additional revenue. Right now, the way the system works, if advanced life support is enacted by SMERA in the town, and even though our basic life support responds first, we don't get any of that revenue. All that revenue goes to SMERA. So in essence, there's about $300,000 of additional revenue, and we'll outline that all at a future meeting. The fourth item is funding the senior center lease. You may recall that the town meeting back in April authorized us to go out and solicit leases for a senior center. We have put out an RFP. We had 3 responses. 2 of the responses were very, very close. Now, just to back up and talk about the RFP process under public procurement, the first thing is to ask for a non-financial proposal. So you establish criteria and you evaluate the proposals based on certain criteria, square footage, access, things like that. I put together a 4-member committee that evaluated the 3 proposals. 2 of the 3 sites were basically a dead heat. They were just basically met all the criteria. So they also are required to provide a price proposal, but you don't look at the price proposal until you've evaluated the sites. We've been in the process of looking at the price proposals. They're kind of apples and oranges, and I've been working with town council to try to figure out how we sort that out. So at this point in time, I don't have a recommended site for you. Hopefully, by the end of the week, we'll have sorted that out, and we'll have a recommended site with some financial information. But just the way the proposals were laid out, it's a little confusing, and we're trying to sort through that. Next item is the lease of 362 to 364 Main Street, which is the Kennedy Landscaping. You may recall that when we acquired the property, formerly known as Walker, we agreed to let the Kennedy Landscaping remain. And while I've had some discussions with Mr. Kennedy, Town Council has informed me that in order to solidify a lease with Mr. Kennedy, it does require town meeting approval. Town meeting has to approve us entering any leases. So that is just kind of a tying the knot. And, you know, the terms that we had discussed with Mr. Kennedy were pretty much keeping the same payments that Mr. Walker was paying him, with the option that we can exchange instead of rent, using some of his plant materials at NARA, at the Arboretum or whatever, in exchange for the funds. The next two items may or may not be placeholders. We're actively working on these two items. One is land acquisition at Piper Lane, the Magoon property, and the other is land acquisition of 53 River Street, which is the Lazaro property. They're both kind of in the midst of negotiations. A little too early to tell if we will be concluded with these by town meeting, but we are working on that. The last 5 articles have been provided by the planning department. If Roland is willing, he can maybe give a synopsis of each one to the board.
The first one is to amend the sections in the zoning bylaw that deal with additions and replacements of additions to and replacements of single-family and two-family dwellings in residential zoning districts. The first part in the article, right now the bylaw allows a replacement of single and two-family dwellings on non-conforming lots. These are non-conforming to size or non-conforming to frontage. The first part is really just a clarification that reconstruction and replacement are the same, because there was confusion on the Board of Appeals on that matter. So we're basically cleaning up the language so that confusion will be gone. The bylaw provides that you can replace those buildings with in-kind, meaning the same floor area, and to do that under the provisions of the zoning bylaw. So this is just a clarification. The other part is a change. What the law provides, and in part it's case law, is that if you have a non-conforming lot, the structure itself on the lot is infected by that non-conformity and becomes non-conforming. I'm not sure that the legislature actually intended that reading, but that's how the courts came out. And so what it then provides in the statute, that if you have a non-conforming structure, it can only be expanded and changed with a special permit. What that in theory means is that the smallest change to a house on a non-conforming lot, and we have quite a few of those, would require a special permit from the Board of Appeals. We have, a few years ago, the town has adopted the 15% rule, which means that anything up to 15% of change in terms of additional floor area on a single-family or two-family dwelling on a non-conforming lot can be done by right, and after that, anything beyond that would require a special permit. We have found that, I'm trying to find the summary, since then, that was in 2012, since then 14 special permits have gone through the process in front of the Board of Appeals, and all have been approved with little or no concerns by public or neighbors. We would like to see this change so that to what it used to be before the courts made that interpretation, that all additions to dwellings on non-conforming lots can be done by right as long as they meet the setback requirements and height and all of those limitations. That's how we started out for quite some time when I was here in my early years, until about 10 years ago or so. So that's number one. Number two, you might remember that there were some changes adopted by town meeting to the accessory apartment rules. We have one more change, and that change would allow accessory apartments in detached dwellings, subject to the same rules, or in detached buildings, subject to the same rules that apartments are subject to if they're attached or incorporated within the building. There has been a lot of talk about tiny houses and providing living options for families, and to provide opportunities for people who are aging in place to provide additional income through perhaps renting out space or creating space to rent. And this would simply allow that by right, instead of not allowing it at all in case of a new construction of a small dwelling unit, or by special permit in case of a conversion of a, let's say, a barn or an existing garage into a dwelling. So that's number two. Number three, we're proposing, or we feel, it's a sort of the same approach. We analyzed how many special permits were granted relative to restaurant seating, and found that currently restaurant seating requires a special permit, or restaurants require a special permit if seating of more than 10 or 10 or more is proposed. We found that all of those in the last, since 2011, this is how far we look back, were approved. There were either no conditions or very few conditions attached. And so we looked at the statistics and looked at averages and medians and all that kind of thing. And as a result of that, we're proposing a new number that triggers a special permit, that is 65 seats or less be without special permit, anything above that to be a special permit. Again, we feel that similarly to the change that we're proposing with regards to single-family homes on non-conforming lots and expansions, there's a lot of spinning of wheels going on for no apparent good purpose. So we'd like the town to be able to consider a change in that. In the same vein, but we don't have a finished draft article for you, is changes to the sign bylaw. A lot of signs above a certain size, if they different dimensions than there's that allowed by right, require special permits. We're working on seeing where we can increase those size and height limits to allow more signage by right, as opposed to by special permit. This sign bylaw, the way it is in place today, has been in effect for over 25 years. Essentially, there were some small modifications made, but it's only in the last, I want to say, 5 to 6, 7 years that we've really seen an uptick in special permits. And the same thing, or special permit requests, there were a few here and there in between over the years before. And the same thing again is these permits are granted. The proposals in front of the board are generally reasonable, so they're granted. There's no public debate at the hearings. Nobody shows up. It's an effort to try to reduce the town's input in special permit procedures, as well as reduce burdens on businesses. And finally, this is also a placeholder, like It's the same thing with the signs. We're still working with a former member of the Outdoor Lighting Committee, Gary Green, who is now working in the planning department as a senior worker, to help us figure out how to adapt the regulations of the zoning bylaw to deal with LED outdoor lighting, which today is the prevalent use for outdoor lighting. When the bylaw was written, it was all written around metal halide and halogen and some other type of lighting that was used at the time. So we're expecting something soon that we can perhaps fill in this article for. It's a bit unique here because the planning board hasn't held a public hearing yet. So we submitted this to you in anticipation of holding a public hearing with the planning board, or the planning board holding a public hearing sometime early to mid-September. We will recommend these articles to the planning board, and hopefully they will come with their recommendation. But you have it today to make a decision on the warrant, and we understood that the warrant be closed today, so we wanted to make sure we have these articles in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Any questions from the board? Franny?
I just want to appreciate all this work, both in making creative changes to our bylaws and also for trying to save paperwork and time to make things easier for people. And so for that reason, I feel very positive about them, because I feel like they're changes that I know some people say, oh, we should wait till the spring, but I think the sooner we make these improvements, the better.
Katie?
So first of all, just about the calling the town meeting we've called it, but closing the warrant, affirming that we're having a town meeting in general. I think particularly with the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement tonight, it makes a lot of sense to do it. We've been trying to do ALS for a long time, so having to wait another fiscal year doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think the opportunity is here, and so we should move forward. The other ones look fine to me. The only ones, we sort of had that recommendation from the town manager in his memo about what we would put on special town meetings, and really it revolved around issues of timeliness. I think the rest of these, meet that criteria. We've talked about having fall town meetings for zoning in general. That's not how this one was generated, and I have some concerns about the timing, just because, we haven't been able to have the planning board hearing yet, and I worry a little bit about trying to make these changes too fast, and I wonder what the downside would be in waiting until the spring for these particular ones. Do you see like a particular need, or are there a lot of projects that you think are coming up that you want to, avoid between October and April, or was it more just we've talked about doing zoning and we're having a fall town meeting, and so you thought these were things you'd been thinking about?
We anticipated to be ready with these articles for the fall town meeting. I'm looking to reduce planning department workload. I used to be here 50 to 60 hours a week. I'm not doing that anymore. I can't. On the other side, while we're talking, we have other applications from residents on the 15% rule coming in front of the Board of Appeals. And every time we tell people that that's what they're up against, they're like, what? What are you talking about? My neighbor did an addition. Then we have to explain that the neighbor is on a conforming lot. And you have 5 feet, 10 feet less frontage, and therefore, too bad, you're going to have to go through the special permit process. It seems just a very awkward way of doing business. So the sooner we can get it done, I think the better it is. But if it has to wait till the spring, it'll have to wait till the spring.
Okay. No, I mean, I agree. I think most of them are things I probably will support, and, it will save a lot of time. I just wonder if they come to a level of, we've been dinged in the past for some of those special town meetings where we ended up just shoving a bunch of stuff in last minute, and I don't know, that was always the best way to do it. And now that we kind of have a policy around it, whether these ones fit in, but otherwise, I'm open.
I might say that we are working already on zoning amendments for the Springtown meeting, and if we can get these out of the way.
Right. Lessons learned. That was the original idea when we talked about originally kind of moving towards a permanent fall town meeting, was to deal with some of the zoning issues so that they weren't, all falling on the last night of annual town meeting. So I'm not totally opposed to it. I'm just bringing it up.
Jing-Sung, anything?
No, most of the stuff looks okay to me. I think some of the stuff can wait, but if we're having a town meeting for ratifying the fire agreement, then putting the rest of the stuff on here since we have it makes sense.
I actually, because I went to the ZBA meeting, I heard a bit about the proposed amendment to address the non-conforming lot issue, which I kind of understand is sort of a matter of fundamental fairness, because there are people who happen to be lucky enough by virtue of having just enough frontage or something like that to be a conforming lot, and therefore by right ability to do things on their property that people who are on non-conforming lots don't, and so they end up having to go through the ZBA process and whatnot. But what I was wondering, do you have any, I know that you've said because of zoning changes that there are lots that were once conforming or just weren't categorized at all that now are non-conforming, and I'm just wondering what proportion of lots, residential lots in our town are non-conforming as opposed to conforming?
I never did the statistics on that.
I'm just wondering if the majority of them are non-conforming.
But they keep coming, and so that's all I can tell you. And so, if you look at the history of zoning in Acton, there was it started out in the 1950s with half-acre zoning, townwide, and then it was, oh my God, and then it became 1-acre zoning in many of the places, and then it became 2-acre zoning in many more places. Meanwhile, a lot of these things had been built, and so the technique around zoning districts is not that clean. So you capture a lot of residential lots that are non-conforming. You go down Maple Street, almost every lot is non-conforming. You go up Prospect Street, probably half of the lots are non-conforming. We found a lot of them in non-set paths that are coming. I don't know why they're non-conforming and how they were created. I didn't do the research on that, but they are. So, Larch Road was one right here behind Town Hall, half a mile west of here, and they just, Minuteman, Newtown Road, just the other night, right here, around the corner. So.
And it's not necessarily related to acreage either, because we're in a 2-acre zone, and we have frontage that's non-conforming. So if we wanted to expand the footprint of our, which we haven't wanted to, plenty of house for us, but.
And some of the lots are in half-acre zones, and they probably existed before zoning was adopted in 1953, so.
Yeah, okay. Would you say that this first article about non-conforming lots is the more important one or the most important one of the several? I'm just wondering, I have the same concern that Katie expressed, which is it is this feeling, and we've been criticized about this for having stuff pile on in fall town meeting. And, I think that although it is true that we talked in the past about having a permanent special town meeting in the fall to address zoning bylaw changes, the fact is that we haven't actually formally adopted that. There was talk on prior boards of doing that, but it never actually became a formal policy or whatever it is, a practice. And so I think that probably realistically, the way that we're going now with the suggested guidelines for when to call a special town meeting, probably sounder, because then you're not sort of forced to have only zoning bylaw amendments in the fall. You can address, if you have a fall town meeting, you can address whatever is pressing, which could be land acquisition or that sort of thing, or it could be, approval of a union agreement that where something else hinges on that and are moving forward. But I didn't know if you felt that any one of these proposed zoning bylaw changes was more important. If we could only pick one, which one would you want us to pick?
I think this is a policy question that maybe you as a board should decide, and for me, it's like I work with anything.
Okay. And I have a question.
Just let me know what you're going to do, because then we can advertise the planning board public hearing accordingly.
The other thing, on the restaurant seating, I'd be interested in what the median was, as opposed to the average. And then finally, signed special permits. What standards would apply if it were by right? There's just the general guidance about signs. The sign bylaw is one of those things that's so cumbersome to read that I haven't read it. So.
That's because it provides a lot of options. I can't cite to you what the by right standards are, but as an example, a freestanding sign on Great Road allowed by right is, and I'm even grasping here without looking at the bylaw, which I don't have with me, it's 12 square feet in size, and I'm just making that up to number, and 7 foot high. And if you want anything larger or taller, up to other certain limits, you have to go and get a special permit from the planning board. The idea there is that smaller signs, signage be allowed by right up to a certain size without taking a look at the design and the looks and the fit into the surroundings. Whereas if you get bigger signs, that they then become scrutinized and reviewed for fit and compatibility with the architecture surrounding it and that kind of thing. And so we're just simply, and this is one example, there's, for wall signs, there are certain limits for width and height and display area and all that stuff. So, and we're looking to increase that number because proposals that come before the planning board are reasonable, always have been, and there hasn't really been any controversy. So we're just looking to move ahead and respond to what's happening in reality.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay, audience members, questions, comments from the audience? Anne, you look as if you're itching to get to the mic.
Actually, I like all the zoning articles. I think they're necessary, and I think we should do them. And I have worked with the sign bylaw as a member of the EDC, and I can contest it is a mess. It is a total and utter mess, and there's something we should do about it. And I think that all the merchants in town would be happy if we finally did something about it. Anyhow, my other question was about the fire agreement. You said that you thought we would get $300,000 instead of it's going to, I don't know what, Smurf, but it wasn't Smurf, whatever it's.
Smurfs, no, we don't let Smurfs do public safety, no.
Yeah, but you said you thought we would get some sort of money back.
Right, it'd be additional revenues for the service, yes.
That comes from insurance companies?
Primarily, yes.
Primary.
Yeah.
Will that cover the bargaining agreements?
Yes, I mean, it would cover at least the first 2 years, sure.
Okay.
I don't have all the numbers, as I said, Mary Ann's father passed away, so I don't.
Oh, yeah,
have all the numbers.
no, I mean, if, it would be nice to have them covered.
Right. The first year of the contract will be just basically a regular collective bargaining contract. The real terms of this contract kick into the second year when when paramedic service kicks in. So in terms of a different pay scale for paramedics and stuff, that's when that will kick in the second year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hi, Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I have comments and then some questions. First of all, I think it's, with the electronic voting, do we know if then all of the votes would be public or whether they would be secret?
You mean the exact numbers of the vote? What the?
No, who voted yes or no?
I don't think, it's not going to be like Congress.
Know.
It's not going to be like Congress.
Okay, so I'm going to say that I'm against, I think it's too early to do electronic voting because there's too many questions relative to what happens in the black box and how we check to make sure that people, actually the vote that they had was in fact counted the way that they thought it was. If you have it public and you can see everybody's vote, just like when you stand up at town meeting, you can see who votes for things, you can tell how many people voted a certain way. So that's my opinion, and we can argue about that at town meeting, I suppose. My question is, well, a couple more questions, but CPA, I heard rumors that we were putting CPA on an increase in CPA taxation on the special town meeting, is that?
What is your question?
Oh, is it, I don't see it on the list of 12.
No, there was a proposal, but I think it's pretty much decided that it's not going to be on the fall town meeting warrant if we have a fall town meeting.
I just heard rumblings earlier this spring about that. Relative to the zoning things, I like the special permit process. And for me, while I'd prefer to reduce some work for the folks in the planning department so that we're spending more time planning instead of permitting, I feel like that this is a good check for neighbors to come forward and be able to come forward. Yes, I agree that, maybe the 14 that he spoke of would be very minor and people wouldn't come, but they had the option to. And I've often gone to lots of special permit hearings which have been very informative, and it allows us an extra check on things that are happening in our neighborhoods. We talked about the moving more development and growth into areas that we wanted to, and changing the zoning, and we could up zone or down zone. And we've already done all that stuff, and it hasn't really worked as well as we hoped. And I think that the special permit process is part of a good check for that. That includes sign. I think that there's way too much signage in town. There's too much bad-looking or horrible-looking signs that we could be working on. And I feel like, yes, the sign bylaw needs some changes, and I hope that we can do that with the DRB relative to making better-looking designs, perhaps by right, but not just larger signs by right. I would like at some point to address residential lighting so that it's not just commercial lighting, because we have way too much lighting around here, I think. And my last comment was about, that the non-conforming lots and all of that whole thing, I believe that we should be, again, having more checks and balances and more restrictions on building that is inappropriate for our neighborhoods. And the special permit process, especially in non-conforming lots, allows neighbors to come forward and comment and be notified that certain things are happening in their area, as opposed to by right, which means that they're basically being rubber stamped downstairs. So I feel like I support keeping the process, at least what I've read so far. I'm hoping for comments from some of the boards and the architects in town to tell us what they think, because some of the areas that you mentioned, specifically Maple Street and Prospect, are areas that we want to preserve the character as opposed to encourage more and more growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so we need to decide what we want on the warrant, and then we close it. So what do people prefer about what should be or should not be on the warrant? I sense that there maybe was some concern about including all of the zoning bylaws amendments, but I don't know if that's, you seem to be okay with all of them, and Shing Sung, it sounded as if you probably were okay with them. And Katie and I had some concerns about adding them, but...
Right, I mean, I have concerns. Again, I guess we're not recommending them or not either tonight. I do have some concerns. I think maybe, I think the sign bylaw is something that probably needs to be a lot of changes to, but I'd like to make sure that there, DRB and other BDC and other people are weighing in on these, and I just worry that with the accelerated timeline that we're not going to get that. But, I mean, again, I'm not completely opposed to it. I think there's some value to being able to focus and have a discussion, a better discussion on those at a fall town meeting, because there will be more people there, because it won't be, 11 o'clock on the second night when we end up doing most of our zoning. So I'm torn. I'm really happy to go either way.
Go ahead, Franny. I would like to quote Charlotte Sagoff, the late Charlotte Sagoff, who always encouraged me to do things earlier. And she was for people who don't know her, a very active especially environmental areas, citizen who died in her 90s a few years ago. And she always said, if you can, to the procrastinator that I am, if you can do it now, do it. So I think if the planning department has put on this work and we can move ahead and have public meetings about it and discuss it now, we may as well. But I would also encourage us to take an active role. It seems this keeps coming up. Do we want to make a plan about what happens in fall town meeting, and do we always have fall town meeting? That the onus is on us to do that. So we should do that. But separate from that, since we're here right now, I would say, in honor of Charlotte's memory, let's go ahead and do it.
Charlotte's not here to deal with these bylaws.
I would say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I would say from a policy perspective, the reason we have the policy on whether or not to call a fall town meeting is so that we can determine whether or not there is a specific issue that needs to be dealt with, and if, in the event that there is, then the town meeting is called. Once the town meeting is called, I think that anything that is ready to be dealt with, and shouldn't be saved for annual town meeting, like their big budget issues or whatnot, right? There's other stuff that is ready to be dealt with, can, and in many cases should be dealt with, sooner rather than later. So I would say that there's two tests. The first critical test is, do we have an issue that needs to be dealt with at a special town meeting? If the answer to that question is yes, and in this case I believe it is, because we have the fire agreement that affects our implementation of ALS for a year. And so, there is that needs to be dealt with at that point in time. Other issues that are ready to be dealt with and are appropriate for fall town meeting, I think, can and should be put on the agenda.
I actually think probably there's general agreement that we should have a fall town meeting to deal with the union agreement and the opportunity to move forward with ALS. And the question is, I think, as to, for me, it really has to do with the zoning bylaw amendments. I understand the concern in the planning department, especially with regard to non-conforming lots. I think, however, one of my frustrations is that, there are questions about, exactly what the impact might be. And certainly with regard to the sign bylaw, I really don't understand what that means. It just.
Well, there's no direct. Two of them are placeholders.
But and the question is, okay, do we want to just say, okay, include them, leave them in, and then decide later whether we want them to stay in the final warrant or just drop them? I mean, if people are comfortable with having a draft warrant, closing the warrant with all of this stuff, not knowing whether some of these, well, most of the land acquisitions are two things that we don't even know if they're going to come to fruition. So the question is whether we'd rather close it with 12 articles as opposed to 7. Doesn't matter. And then there's the issue of preparation and all that. It's a little more preparation if this actually becomes the final warrant.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I think if we say go forward with the 12, then, it will accelerate it. The 2 I'm probably most concerned about are the ones that were placeholders that really there wasn't a lot of info about them already tonight, and we're not that far off. And, it's hard in this time frame of getting people excited and, interested and informed about all these issues is tough. And so, I don't know, I'm a little concerned about the lighting and the sign bylaw, but we can leave them on and then figure it out.
Well, I guess, what we could do is just close with these items and then, see if as, the days go on, if we get more information about them. Because, honestly, I think that if we have as little information about them as we do right now, I don't think that they're going to get far. So, okay. Does anybody want to make a motion about closing the warrant with the 12 articles?
I move that we close the warrant with these 12 articles on it.
Second.
Okay, Franny moves and Katie seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. I
Motion
think we're
to
done.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Katie moves.
Second.
Ching Sung seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Thank you.